Welcome to the Endocrine Matters podcast. This podcast episode is sponsored by Complete Medicine and Hey Healthy. If you are currently taking Armour Thyroid, NP Thyroid, or any compounded thyroid medication, this episode is for you, and I need you to hear what I'm about to say carefully. In August 2025, the FDA took enforcement action against manufacturers of desiccated thyroid extract products, medications that roughly 1.5 million Americans take every day. Then, 6 months later, the FDA reversed course, and as of today, April 1st, 2026, CVS Caremark is removing NP Thyroid from its covered drug formulary. If you have been watching this situation unfold and you are confused, scared, or unsure what to do, that is a completely rational response because the messaging from the FDA, from pharmacies, and from various corners of the internet has been contradictory, incomplete, and in some cases, actively misleading. I'm going to give you the accurate clinical picture, and then I want to have a bigger conversation that I think is long overdue about what options actually exist for patients who are still symptomatic on levothyroxine alone and what the evidence says about those options. Welcome to Endocrine Matters. I'm Dr. Arti Thangudu, board-certified endocrinologist and founder of Complete Medicine. I work with thyroid patients every day. I have seen the confusion that the last 8 months of FDA messaging has created for my patient population, and I have had this conversation, the one we're about to have, several times already. So I wanted to record it so that more of you can hear it. We're going to cover the FDA actions and what they actually mean. We're going to talk about the American Thyroid Association's position on desiccated thyroid extract and combination T4-T3 therapy. And then we're going to talk about what I genuinely believe is a more useful conversation for patients with persistent symptoms on levothyroxine: the evidence for combination therapy using pharmaceutical-grade liothyronine, what it can do, who it's appropriate for, and the risks you have a right to understand. Let's start with the facts. So what actually happened? Desiccated thyroid extract, or NDT, includes products like Armour Thyroid, NP Thyroid, and various compounded thyroid preparations. These have been prescribed in the United States for a really long time, since even before the modern FDA existed. They are derived from porcine thyroid glands, so pig thyroid glands, and contain both T4 and T3, the two thyroid hormones your body makes naturally. In August 2025, the FDA issued letters to manufacturers of NDT products informing them that these products were being reclassified as biologics, not standard small molecule drugs. Biologics are a category that includes things like monoclonal antibodies and complex protein-based therapies. Biologics require a different, more rigorous, and more expensive approval process, a biologics license application, or BLA. The reason for this reclassification was that NDT is derived from animal tissue and contains a complex mixture of proteins, not just isolated hormone molecules. The FDA's position was that this complexity made it a biologic under current regulatory definitions. So what was the practical consequence? Manufacturers of Armour Thyroid, NP Thyroid, and similar products were given a 12-month window to either obtain a biologics license application or face enforcement action, meaning their products would be pulled from the market. For approximately 1.5 million Americans on NDT, this was alarming news, and the alarm was reasonable. Then, in March 2026, the FDA issued a policy update that walked some of that back. The language shifted to a risk-based enforcement approach, which is regulatory shorthand for we are not going to aggressively pull these products from the market while manufacturers work toward compliance. The FDA explicitly stated that ensuring continued patient access to these products was a priority. So what does that mean practically? It means that if you are on Armour Thyroid today, you do not need to panic. It means the FDA is not expected to remove these products from the market immediately. It means manufacturers are continuing to produce and sell these products while navigating the approval process. What it does not mean is that this issue is resolved. The FDA's underlying position on NDT as a biologic has not changed. The BLA requirement has not been waived. This is a stay of enforcement, not a reversal of policy, so the situation bears watching. Separate from the FDA action, but happening simultaneously, as of today, April 1st, 2026, CVS Caremark is removing NP Thyroid and other desiccated thyroid products from many of its formularies. This means if your insurance plan uses CVS Caremark as its pharmacy benefit manager and you are on one of these products, you may face significantly higher out-of-pocket costs or need to switch medications. Here's what I would tell my patients in this situation. First, call your insurance, find out which thyroid medications are on your plan's formulary. Armour Thyroid may still be covered if NP Thyroid is not. Formularies vary by plan, so get the specific information for your specific coverage. Second, talk to your physician before switching medications. Do not just accept a pharmacy substitution without a conversation with your doctor. Switching between different formulations of desiccated thyroid or switching from NDT to levothyroxine requires dose adjustments and monitoring. A formulary change should trigger a clinical conversation, not an automatic swap. Third, if you are considering compounded thyroid medication as an alternative, which some patients pursue when brand name NDT becomes unavailable or unaffordable, please be aware that the FDA's position on compounded thyroid preparations is equally complicated. Compounded medications are not FDA approved and do not have the quality control standards of commercially manufactured drugs, even if they say they do, even if they say they have higher standards. If you go this route, work with a physician who will monitor your labs carefully. Fourth, do not order thyroid medications from online pharmacies or wellness websites that do not require a prescription. I'm going to say more about the online thyroid optimization industry in a few minutes, but I want to plant this flag clearly now. Obtaining thyroid hormones without physician supervision is genuinely dangerous. Let's talk about what the American Thyroid Association, ATA, and ACE, American Association for Clinical Endocrinologists, actually say. I want to spend a few minutes on what our major endocrinology and thyroid professional societies say about NDT and combination T4-T3 therapy, because this gets misrepresented online, both by people who want to dismiss these approaches entirely and by people who want to claim the societies fully endorse them when they don't. The ATA's position and ACE's position is that levothyroxine, synthetic T4, is the standard of care for hypothyroidism. This is based on a body of evidence showing that for most patients, levothyroxine effectively normalizes thyroid hormone levels and resolves hypothyroid symptoms. Their concerns about desiccated thyroid extract are specific and evidence-based. First, the T4 to T3 ratio in animal thyroid is different from human thyroid. Porcine NDT contains significantly more T3 relative to T4 than humans produce naturally. This means that on a typical dose of NDT, blood T3 levels will be higher than physiologic for a period after each dose before declining, creating peaks and troughs that don't reflect normal human thyroid physiology. Second, batch-to-batch variability. The hormone content of NDT can vary between production lots, making precise dosing difficult. Third, NDT contains animal-derived proteins with no characterization for immunogenicity, a concern for biologics that don't exist for synthetic hormones. However, and I want to be emphatic about this, the ATA's 2021 joint consensus statement with the British and European Thyroid Associations acknowledged that some patients with persistent symptoms on levothyroxine may benefit from combination T4-T3 therapy. The statement was nuanced. It did not recommend combination therapy as a first-line treatment, but it explicitly recognized that a subset of patients, and I see this myself in my clinic, particularly those who may have impaired T4 to T3 conversion due to a genetic variation, who may have persistent symptoms on T4 monotherapy, some of them do respond with additional T3. That nuance matters, though, because the conversation in medicine has too often been binary. Either levothyroxine is perfect for everyone, or NDT is the only real treatment. The evidence supports neither extreme. I want to address something now that I'm asked about regularly by my patients, and that I believe is causing real harm in the thyroid patient community. There are practitioners and online personalities who have built significant platforms around the message that levothyroxine doesn't work, that endocrinologists are keeping patients sick by following outdated guidelines, and that T3-based therapies sold through their clinics or directly on their websites are the answer that conventional medicine is hiding from you. I want to address the specific claims in this narrative because some of them contain a kernel of legitimate science that gets stretched far beyond what the evidence supports, and that stretch is where patients get hurt financially and physically. Claim 1, TSH is a meaningless test. You will hear this framed as your doctor is using the wrong labs as a justification for ignoring TSH targets. Here is the actual science. TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, is produced by the pituitary gland in direct response to circulating thyroid hormone levels. It is the most sensitive available indicator of whether your body's tissues are receiving too much or too little thyroid hormone. When practitioners tell you TSH is meaningless, they are asking you to ignore the most validated, the most sensitive, and the most clinically useful marker of thyroid function we have. The reason this claim is made is to justify keeping your TSH artificially suppressed, below 1, sometimes even below 0.5, at doses that by definition produce subclinical hyperthyroidism, sometimes even clinical hyperthyroidism. And subclinical hyperthyroidism and hyperthyroidism itself, even if it's caused by a pill that we give you, has real consequences. I'll talk about those in a few minutes. Claim 2. Reverse T3 blocks your T3 receptors. Reverse T3 is a metabolite of T4. It's produced when T4 is converted through an alternate pathway. Some practitioners sell proprietary reverse T3 panels for several $100s, claim that elevated reverse T3 is blocking T3 from reaching your cells, and use this to justify high-dose T3 therapy or NDT. Here's what the evidence says. Reverse T3 is an inactive metabolite. The claim that it competes with active T3 at the receptor level and blocks thyroid function is not supported by peer-reviewed human clinical data. Reverse T3 may be a marker of physiological stress or illness. It rises when your body is under significant stress as part of a normal adaptive response. But it is not a validated clinical target, and treating it with high-dose T3 is not supported by evidence. When you see a practitioner charging you $300 to $500 for a reverse T3 panel followed by a T3 optimization protocol, you should understand you are paying for a narrative, not a medical workup. Claim 3. Almost everyone on levothyroxine has poor T4 to T3 conversion. The grain of truth here, some people do have impaired T4 to T3 conversion, particularly those with the variant of the DIO2 gene that affects the deiodinase enzyme responsible for that conversion. There is legitimate emerging research on this, but the implication that this applies to most patients on levothyroxine and therefore most patients need T3 therapy is a significant overreach. The research on DIO2 variants and symptomatic benefit from combination therapy is promising, but not definitive. It is not a blanket justification for T3 therapy in everyone who feels less than perfect on levothyroxine, though it can be used safely in specific cases. I want to be honest about why patients are drawn to this narrative. Because some patients genuinely do have persistent symptoms on levothyroxine despite normal TSH, and they have been dismissed by physicians who said, essentially, your labs are normal, so you must be fine. That dismissal is a real problem, and the wellness industry has correctly identified a gap in how conventional endocrinology communicates with patients. They fill that gap with misinformation. The answer isn't to accept the misinformation. The answer is to have the legitimate clinical conversation that should have happened already. Let me tell you what I actually do when a patient comes to me who is on levothyroxine, whose TSH is in the normal range, and who still has fatigue, brain fog, weight gain, or other hypothyroid type symptoms that haven't resolved. The first thing I do is make sure we've excluded other explanations. Iron deficiency, vitamin D deficiency, adrenal dysfunction, perimenopause, sleep disorders, and depression can all mimic or compound hypothyroid symptoms. I want a complete picture before attributing everything to the thyroid. If the clinical picture genuinely points to inadequate thyroid hormone effect at the tissue level, despite normal TSH, there is a legitimate option I consider and I have used in my practice, adding low-dose pharmaceutical-grade liothyronine, synthetic T3, to the existing levothyroxine regimen. I want to be very specific about what I mean by this, because this is fundamentally different from what wellness practitioners are selling as T3 optimization. Here's the distinction. Pharmaceutical-grade liothyronine is FDA-regulated, commercially manufactured with consistent dosing, and has a known pharmacokinetic profile. The doses I use are low, typically 5 milligrams or even as low as 2.5 milligrams, added to the patient's existing levothyroxine. We are supplementing a small amount of T3 to address a potential conversion deficit or a tissue uptake issue, not replacing T4 with T3 or optimizing T3 to some arbitrary target. This is different from NDT in a clinically important way. The T3 dose in liothyronine is known and controllable. In NDT, the T3 content varies by batch, and the ratio of T3 to T4 is higher than physiologic. With synthetic liothyronine, I know exactly how much T3 I'm adding. I can start very low, and I can titrate carefully. I monitor my patients carefully. T3 has a short half-life, about 8 hours, meaning it peaks and troughs within the day. This matters for when blood levels are drawn and for cardiac effects. I check free T3 levels in some patients, I check TSH, and critically, I check for symptoms and signs of excess T3, including heart rate, palpitations, sleep quality, and bone density over time. I also discuss who is most likely to benefit: patients with documented issues with conversion, patients with persistent symptoms despite consistently optimal TSH levels on adequate levothyroxine dosing, patients without active cardiac disease or significant osteoporosis risk, because those are populations where excess T3 has the most serious downside. There is an evidence-informed approach that some patients benefit from enormously. It is not for everyone. It is not a protocol to be sold through a website, and it requires physician oversight and laboratory monitoring to be safe. Now, I want to spend a few minutes on something that is almost completely absent from the wellness industry's T3 narrative: the real and serious risks of excess thyroid hormone. First, let's talk about atrial fibrillation. Even subclinical hyperthyroidism, a TSH below 1 with normal free T3 and T4, is associated with a significantly increased risk of atrial fibrillation. The mechanism is well understood. Excess thyroid hormone increases heart rate, increases cardiac contractility, and can trigger arrhythmia, particularly in older patients and those with underlying cardiac vulnerability. Atrial fibrillation is not a mild inconvenience. It is a stroke risk factor. When practitioners suppress TSH to nearly undetectable levels in the name of optimization, they are accepting this risk on your behalf without always telling you it exists. Next, bone density. Subclinical and overt hyperthyroidism accelerates bone turnover and reduces bone mineral density. In postmenopausal women who are already at elevated risk for osteoporosis due to declining estrogen, chronic low-grade excess thyroid hormone represents a significant compounding risk. The research is consistent on this. Suppressed TSH is associated with increased fracture risk. If you are a perimenopausal or postmenopausal woman being told to keep your TSH suppressed in the name of thyroid optimization, your bones deserve a seat at that clinical conversation. Now let's talk about cardiovascular effects. Beyond arrhythmia, excess thyroid hormone increases resting heart rate, blood pressure, and cardiac work. For patients with existing cardiovascular disease, coronary artery disease, or hypertension, this is not an academic concern. I say all of this not to frighten you out of having a real conversation about combination therapy or T3. I say it because I believe patients deserve accurate risk information, not a one-sided narrative from the practitioners who profit from the therapy. The risks are real. They are manageable with proper dosing and proper monitoring, but they cannot be ignored or omitted, which is what happens when T3 therapy is sold online as a wellness optimization protocol rather than practiced as a clinical intervention. Let me close with what I want you to actually do with this information. If you are on NDT and you are worried, don't panic, but do pay attention. The FDA's enforcement pause means these products are not going away immediately. But check your insurance formulary, have a conversation with your prescribing physician, make sure someone is monitoring your thyroid labs and adjusting your dose appropriately. If you are on levothyroxine and you still have symptoms, you have options and you have the right to discuss them with a physician who takes your experience seriously. Ask about things like fasting insulin resistance, ask about iron studies and vitamin D, ask whether combination T4, T3 therapy might be an appropriate option for your clinical picture. If your doctor dismisses you without engaging those questions, you have the right to seek a second opinion. And if you are considering a T3 protocol you found online or through a wellness clinic, please ask for the peer-reviewed evidence. Please ask what monitoring will be done. Please ask about risks. You deserve a physician who will answer those questions. Thank you for listening to Endocrine Matters. I'm Dr. Arti Thangudu. If this episode was helpful, please share it. There are a lot of patients navigating the thyroid space right now with a lot of misinformation and not enough physician voices. I'm trying to be one of them. You can learn more about my practice at sacomplete.com or follow me on Instagram at Dr. Arti Thangudu. I'll see you next time.